if we sign up to be Yahweh's Zavot, we better really consider the ramifications of that. In Isaiah 13, it's a whole nother tangent, but just to mention it, Yahweh says he's calling in, depending on the translation, my proudly exulting ones who are exuberant over my grandeur. Proudly exulting under his flag. And I point to this Adi because if you look at the shape of a flying flag, you can picture a fluttering flag. And that's the picture of a Zadi. So I can look at the orthography, the shape of that letter, and say, here's the flag, and this means army, and this means covenant, and this means as I planned, and so shall it be, and this is a sworn oath. It's like, gosh, Yahweh swore an oath. And everybody in his army is exhilarated. They are exuberant over Yahweh's grandeur. Not their own, not that they get to go loot the enemy and grab a few coins from the dead guy's pocket and put it in their own. It's not about that. The people who are in Yahweh's forces, if you read Isaiah 13, the first 15 or so verses, this is Yahweh's SWAT team. This is Yahweh's, as we would call it, Delta Force. They're the ones who are his chief warriors. And so we think, gosh, those are like these other angels and these other whoever. He says they're coming from the far side of the universe. Some other dimension, that's another study. But what I'm saying is that that's supposed to be a model of our attitude about him and his stuff. If we look at Nun Zadi Bet, that's another prefix. It means to stand, set up, erected, looking like the Washington Monument. Stationed, set, fixed, established, substituted. In mathematics, if you have a variable and you substitute this number for this letter as you're solving an equation, it's the same thing. I'm trying to show you that if I want to know what Zadi Bet means, stick other letters in front of it. And if you know what each letter means, it's a way of analyzing the effective change of that letter's value added on to the base root of those letters you're trying to look for. That's the methodology of doing what Jim calls sephering. The reason it's called sephering is because Abraham was told to sepher the stars. The word sepher is translated count or number. How do you count the stars? Nobody can count the stars. There's too many. However, the word sepher also means narrate or tell a story. To connect the dots. What are the dots? They're like military outposts, like forts. It's exactly the thing we're talking about. How do you connect the dots? Well, if each of the 22 letters are like Yahweh's forts or forces, and you connect them all together, and you read the whole alphabet as a word, then you're actually gathering the entire scope of the frontier of Yahweh's jurisdiction over his creation. Which means this is even a bigger thing than just spelling words. It has to do with catching Yahuwah's personal vision for the scope of his reign, his kingdom, his dominion, of which Yeshua is the chief, the head, the king, the prince. In which case, if we're his subjects, we should have that same vista, the same viewpoint, which includes what will he allow his adversaries to do, and what will he not allow them to do. And when Yeshua said, you want my kingdom to reign? You guys are praying, thy kingdom come, thy will be done? Tell you what, I'm giving you some of the control, some of the reins. You go represent me, make it happen. Make what happen? His kingdom authority, his kingdom reign. How do you do that? Take authority over the devil and tell him to get back. If you start to get a picture of this whole thing, that almost disappears. When I say almost disappears, it reduces in scope to the point where the way you take authority over the adversary is you do what he said. And when there's two letters which look like weapons, the Zion and the Zodi, Zodi again is a fishhook shape, and the Zion looks like an axe or a plowshare. And they both represent the seventh-day Sabbath. The way I see that is that if we sit down on the seventh-day Sabbath like he said, we stop working, suddenly we're empowered with weapons. Weapons to do what? Well, like Eric said the other day, we fight not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. Okay, so this is a spiritual war. If he says the weapons of your spiritual warfare are given to you when you follow the instructions for Shabbat, and then our enemy tells our enemy that he identified as Egypt, Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome. So the adversary, Hasatan, tells those powers that were allowed to be over us, hey, change the day so that they don't sit down on Shabbat. Guess what? They took our weapons away and we let them do it. He changed the Moedim, so instead of the 7 festivals of Leviticus 23, we get Christmas and Easter. You guys should be happy about that. Only if it wasn't enough that they were simply changed, they're blended with pagan idolatry. Doesn't that give anybody a clue? If every one of the letters represents his military fortresses and forts, garrisons along the perimeter of his dominion, then every one of the Moedim, of which there's 7, are represented by these letters. Then every time we fail to keep one of the Moedim, we just blew up one of Yahweh's forts. Doesn't that kind of create a hole on the frontier for the enemy to stream in? I mean, if you want to picture spiritual warfare like what Eric Taylor, I believe his name is, Turner, was talking about, it's like, okay, let's extend that a little bit. It's like Yahweh said, these are my fortresses where I have stationed my dominion, and if you guys simply observe the festivals, you're maintaining the stability of those fortresses. And then the collective 2,000-year consciousness of the church and culture has been, whatever, Jewish stuff. Throw it away. And as we saw in that video, what was the name of that video?
Last night?
Yeah.
Let the lion roar.
Let the Lion Roar. A video showing something about the Reformation and where it stopped or failed to continue. Just be on record here in video in case anybody wants to look at it. It's pretty interesting. What I'm saying is, as we're studying simply one simple word, it suddenly gives this whole other picture of what's going on. And we go, oh gosh, how in the world, if you came to a war zone and you saw just completely annihilated, blown up forts all along the perimeter, and you're going, man, whatever country this was, whoever had this military engagement, and they saw themselves completely, their whole front destroyed, how in the world are they going to rebuild those things? It's pretty easy. Just sit down and observe them. That's what Yahweh gave us. By us observing these Moedim, we are reestablishing his frontier and his kingdom. Boom! Instantly we have taken back territory that the enemy in his deception thought that he got away with for 2,000 years. Instantly we've taken it back. Instantly his flag is flying. We have imported it because, bam, that's the covenant. That is the sign of his reign. And yet, the only thing I was ever taught was just pray thy kingdom come, and pray that one of these days Jesus is going to come back and do the job for us when he shows up with his angels on white horses. It's like he's got us as his avot. The angels on the white horses is some completely other thing. Do we know who we are? He's entrusted his kingdom to us to take it to the front. And he says, don't even be afraid. They can't do anything to you. And then we hear a certain message says, hey, we're going to lose. Sorry, I disagree. I disagree. And I could show you why I disagree. I did a talk up in Canada, it's, Colin Howie's YouTube site, based on Daniel 9:24 and 9:27, and a few other verses. The very words that says this fourth beast is allowed to destroy his people, chew them up, grind them with iron teeth and claws of copper. In analyzing those very words that made it look like Yahweh has already predetermined, predestined, that his people be overcome. That his people are subjected to this fourth beast that Daniel kind of was terrified over. He says, within him it was like a sword rattling around in its sheath, like, what is this fourth beast? Silly me, when I look at those same words in Hebrew, it looks like he's talking about publishing words. Publishing words? I'd have to show you that study, but it's on the internet.
That was 927.
927. If you go to Colin Howie, here I'll put this up. It's just a YouTube site. COLINHOWIE. It's a talk I did this last year in Calgary. YouTube. Anyway, the point is, that's just my interpretation. So here, Yahweh told us not be afraid. We read Daniel 9 and suddenly we're very afraid because of the translation we have. That's what it says. Oh, but if you look at it in Hebrew, suddenly I see reasons to not be afraid, and I see that what it really says is the guys that run the publishing operations, like the translations, have been given a power over us until we come back to the terms of the covenant, like Yahweh said. It all fits. And it wasn't even the devil did it, it was Yahweh that did it. Waiting for there to be a generation, hey, that's us, who would come back to his words. And when Yahweh says, Zadi Bet, he positioned it, he stationed it, that's where he stands, then what we have to realize is that when he says that's where he stands, it's like you can't move it or shake it. It's there. It's solid. It's absolute. No compromise, no question, no change. We have to get these concepts into our head. So this word nun zadi bet, to stand, station, substitute, it also means appointed over others, high-ranking police officer, perpendicular. Perpendicular. It also, this is the word spelled nun zadi bet, is a knife handle or a sword. See that? If you put the blade of a sword, that which is put in. Wait a minute, that which is put in. Remember when I wrote over here earlier that this name Yod He Vav He was his Shem Zakar, Zion Kaf Resh, and this means this masculine thing like a pointed side of a tool, that which is stuck in. When he said Anoki, Ayin Nun Kaf Yod, Anki, that's the word translated I am. It's the first word of Exodus 20. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Anoki Yahweh Elheka. This word Anok means plumb line. This concept of perpendicular is to drop something down perfectly straight. When he gave us these words, he was showing us, if you know how to read these words, this is where the absolute, everything built solidly, plumb level square. The word yeshar, Yod Shin Resh, as in Ishar El. El is power and strength. Yeshar means smooth, level, straight, plumb, level, square. It's similar to the word asher, which means to validate, authenticate, confirm. It's all synonymous words with Zadi Bet. Yeshua's coming back with this sword coming out of his mouth. How's he carry it? Kind of joke around. If this is a sword, does he carry it like a pirate? Arr! We're not supposed to run with scissors, and he's coming back flying on a horse carrying a sword in his mouth? Isn't that kind of dangerous? Is he carrying the sword like this? What's this mean, a sword coming out of his mouth? If the sword blade is coming out of the mouth, then what part is in his mouth? The handle? It's these pictures. What comes out of your mouth? Words. Well, so the words that come out of his mouth are like a sword? But this says the thing that's like a sword is his name. He also says that this thing that comes out of his mouth is a Zadi Bet, a knife handle. He's holding on to this. It's solid. Okay, so what do we trust in? We got 40,000 different denominations. Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox, Jews, rabbis, and there's hundreds of apparently Jewish sects. Which one do you believe?
Last one standing.
We believe his words. We believe how to interpret his words. He gave us these letters and positioned them absolute. I'm trying to show you that you have a confidence in what these letters mean because they all fit according to the Mishkan pattern, which is his stuff, which speaks of him, which is his kingdom, and the Ayin Dal and Ayin Tav, Yeshua himself in each letter is what validates that each one of those letters are the truth. Just a couple more here, and then I can show you one more thing about the whole string of letters. If you look at just simply Zadi, what is it? Zadi Yod Bet, I think I was looking at here. Zadi Yod Bet is the word for fiber. As you would put rebar in concrete. That's what makes it stable and strong, and being able to withstand forces. I'm trying to show you that if you look through here and keep looking, anything with Zadi and Bet, you're going to get the same theme. That's the way you use the dictionary. People have asked me to explain how in the world do you use this thing. I'm trying to take this time to show you disintegrate down to the integers of the words and just start messing around. Just start looking. It's a fixed set, 22 letters in various combinations. And as you start looking at verses in the scripture and the spelling of words here, the key to the whole thing is the meaning of the letters. So, I'm going to write one more time for you the meanings of the letters in a way that hopefully is kind of cohesive. But let me say this about the word Cohen. If you look in the dictionary for the breaking down how these letters work, Kaf He means yes, so truly thus. Just like we read Zadi Bet. It's absolute, it's solid, it's firm. Hey Nun, Han, is to behold. It really finds the form of its spelling in Hey Nun Hey, but Hey is the feminine suffix to put on display. And this word is pronounced Hana, or Hannah, which means hey, behold, hey, Hana, look, look, look. When Abraham said, here am I, the word was Hineni, Hey Nun, Nun, Hey, or I believe there was a yod there, Hineni. It's to behold, hear, gladly, pleasantly. That's the Hey Nun. If you look at Kaf Nun, the first letter and the last letter, because this Yods and Vavs are like these wild cards, Hays and Alephs are kind of like a secondary type of a wild card. You'll find that as you start looking around. If you look at Kaf Nun, as I said the other day, it means solid, true, firm, steady, absolute. It's the way, and if you add another nun, if you duplicate the second letter and make it the third, that's where we get the word canon, C-A-N-N-O-N. Even though that's a K, the vowels are dropped in as wildcards. It's the Semitic language format, but it's something that you set up, make it solid, you aim it in particular, you adjust it in order to hit a certain target, and like a cannon, like a rifle, you put in a certain type of gunpowder load, a certain weight of the ballistic, a certain angle for the right trajectory given the conditions of the air and the density and the barometric pressure, and how much you're going to try to launch this and hit a very particular target. This is the word priest. Jim mentioned about a priest. All these things that I just talked about is what a priest does. Yes, so, truly thus, here it is, perfectly dialed in like a tuner on a radio. And if you look through the meanings in the dictionary, it means adjusted, tuned, like a tuning fork when you're having a stringed instrument and you're trying to get it dialed in. That's the priest's job, to tell you what's true. That's the word zavot. That's the meaning of the letters. You dial in the true meanings of the letters, and the Kohen's job is to make that beautiful, pleasant, clear, legible, easy to read for the people. Which is what all these talks are about. That's what we're doing. How do you do it? Look at the dictionary. Read his words. Consider them to be true, solid, firm, trustworthy. Figure out what he said, and then do what he said. And as we do what he said, we are bringing his kingdom present tense. So when the disciples said to Yeshua, when he rose from the dead, the first thing they asked him, is it now you're going to restore the kingdom to Israel? How do you restore the kingdom to Israel? Israel just has to walk in the ways of Yahuwah according to what he said, the letters of the alphabet, in the words of the Torah. And his kingdom is here. You could sit there and you could take the English words of Yeshua's response. It is not for you to know the times of the, only the Father knows. And it's like, well, as we said earlier, it was 2,300 years ago that his name was taken out in the Septuagint. Now we get his name back. And there's something about 2,300 years or 2,300 days in the prophecies of Daniel. 2,300 days of hell that Joseph Dumont wrote his book. He's talking about a future tribulation, 2,300 days of hell. Maybe there's a duality. We just went through 2,300 years of halal. Interesting thing about the word halal, het lamed lamed, it means, it's in Ezekiel 36:23, you have made my Shem halal in the ayin of the goyim. That's what Yahweh said. You have made my name this in the ayin, the understanding and the weighing, the measuring, the balancing, translated eyes, of the nation, the goyim, amongst whom you've been scattered. This is a very particular verse, Ezekiel 36:23. We talked about this other day, one in the evening. I'll bring it up to you here. Listen to this. The previous verses of Ezekiel 36, Yahweh complains. Just back up one verse. Well, here I'll back up a little bit more. He's talking about the land. Go back to verse 13. We could talk about the whole chapter, but here. Thus says Yahweh Elohim, because people say of the land of Israel, or the city of Jerusalem, you devour man and you have become one who drives out your nation. The city of Jerusalem is known as the city that devours its inhabitants. Wave after wave of invaders. That city just chews everybody up. It has for this over the centuries. Therefore, you will no longer devour people. You will never again drive out your nations. This is a future prophecy which hasn't come true yet. Ezekiel 36:13. And then it says, Nam Yahweh, the word of the Lord Hashem Elohim. When he says Nam Yahweh, that's like this signet ring stamp. It has to happen. The world can't end before this happens. Nam Yahweh. That's another matter we'll get to later. I will no longer allow the derision of nations to be heard about you. People are still deriding Jerusalem. This hasn't happened yet. And you will no longer bear the shame of the people, and you will never again cause your nations to falter. Nam Yahweh. Who's he talking about this? This sets up a future that we haven't encountered yet. So for me to believe that we have maybe 1,000 years in front of us to live out Yahweh's promises is based on stuff like this, just reading his words. The word of Yahweh came to me, this is Ezekiel 6, verse 16, Son of man, the house of Israel dwell in their land, and they have contaminated it with their way and with their acts. The way of the house of Israel has become like the contamination of a menstruous woman before me. So, this is not the devil, this is Yahweh. I poured out my wrath upon them because of the blood that they have shed in the land, and because they defiled it with their idols. Bloodshed and idolatry. So Yahweh said, we did it to ourselves. I scattered them among the nations, and they were dispersed among the lands. According to their way and according to their acts did I judge them. Here's the balancing of scales. Yahweh didn't just throw a fit and wreck everybody. He said, measure for measure. According to their way, balance scales of justice. And according to their own acts, I returned upon them exactly what they put in their scales. So when we put in righteousness, mishpat, emet, and chesed, truth, kindness, balanced scales of justice and right ruling and righteousness, that's what we're also going to get back. That's how we change the scales. That's how we get the kingdom back. They came, verse 20, they came among the nations where they came, and they desecrated my holy name when it was said of them, oh, these are the people of Yahweh, but they were departed from his land. We are standing here in Cherokee lands. The Cherokee are known to have come from another land across the sea, and they had been scattered. They had been driven out because of whatever reason. It fits this description. And they came here and apparently also did detestable things, and so they were driven out and slaughtered and sent to Oklahoma. And now they're coming back to try to gain a little bit of foothold on their national heritage land. They're not going back far enough. We have to go back to Israel. We have to go back to our forefathers, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. I took pity on my kadosh name, which the house of Israel had desecrated amongst the nations where they came. Therefore, say to the house of Israel, thus says Yahweh Elohim, it is not for your sake that I act. We can't look at the Cherokee or the African Americans or the Irish Scotch or the French German. We can't look and say, oh, you poor guys, look what everybody did to you. They deserved it. They did it to themselves. Our ancestors messed the whole thing up. And it's not for, oh, poor us, that we are talking about these words. It's for his name's sake. That's what he said. O house of Israel, for my kadosh name that you have desecrated among the nations where you came. That includes the United States. I will sanctify my great name that is desecrated among the nations, that you have desecrated among them. Then the nations will know that I am Yahweh. Okay, so he cast out Israel because they did such pollution and abomination and bloodshed in the land of Israel. He scattered them amongst the nations. They came here across the seas to the North and South American continents and the rest of the world, and they continued to desecrate his name. The word desecrate is het lamed lamed, and it means vile, profane, to be common, which is to say, use curse words, and people say, oh, those are profanity. Well, the word profane means gutter talk. It means to punch holes in something, drain it out, and make it empty. It's a priest denied the priesthood, and a priest of questionable genealogical descent. All those things are kind of the story of Yeshua. He was punched holes in, drained out his blood. He was of questionable genealogical descent. Nobody knew what his father really was. He was denied